Hello, and welcome to the Rough Edges podcast with Sarah I. Fox. In this podcast, I will guide you through my faith and mental health journey to dispel the stigma surrounding mental illness and to create an empowering resource for those who wish to discover more about these topics. I pray that this podcast will not only bless you, but that it will bring growth and healing to our communities. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Rough Edges. I am very excited because this episode marks the beginning of the 6th season of the podcast. I can't believe it, but I am very excited because the topic for this season is men's mental health. And I've been meaning to cover this topic for some time now. And I originally wanted to do it in a single episode, just a bonus episode giving information about the stigma surrounding it and just how mental health looks for men. And I realized that a single episode wouldn't do this topic justice. I wanted to branch out to do an entire season dedicated to this topic because I believe that men's mental health is something that is heavily stigmatized, and it is also something that is not often talked about unless you are a strictly, male centric show. But for me, I wanted to be able to branch out and talk about how men navigate managing mental health conditions and what the stigma does to suppress the voices that men have on this particular topic. And so I am very excited to not only have a whole season dedicated to this topic, but to also speak to a variety of men who come from all different walks of life and just hearing their experiences with managing their mental health and also destigmatizing what psychological issues look like in the male demographic. And so I wanted to give some overview of what men's mental health actually looks like, what the stigmas are, and just ways that men could begin to seek help for their mental health. I wanted to share some statistics surrounding this topic. These statistics come from the Relief Mental Health website, and it really highlights the silent struggle that a lot of men go through, especially when thinking about seeking help for their mental health. So, there is a traditional masculine norm that often discourages men from seeking help or suppressing their emotions out of fear for vulnerability. And so the statistics reveal that according to the National Institute of Mental Health, men account for about 4 times the number of completed suicides compared to women in the United States. Another statistic shows that studies done by the CDC, men reported higher rates of depression and suicidal ideation than women. Another stat says 1 in 10 men experience some form of depression or anxiety, but less than half seek treatment. Another statistic says only 40% of men receive mental health services compared to 51.7% of women. So these statistics show that there is an epidemic going on in terms of men seeking help for their mental health. And I believe a lot of that has to do with the stigmatization of men being seen as weak or pathetic, or it demasculates them because they have mental health issues. And given that there is a stigma, that creates other barriers to seeking help. There are also unconscious biases from medical providers that leads to ineffective treatment and misdiagnosis on a lot of men. And especially with addressing the challenges that can come from creating environments where men feel, uncomfortable speaking about their mental health, there needs to be more spaces where men could feel more comfortable with discussing their mental health without fear of being judged or being perceived as weak or less masculine than the next man. And so it's very important that, especially with these platforms that people have and different podcasts and also different organizations, we need to raise awareness so that more men could speak out and seek help for their mental health. Because there is an element of pressure that comes from not only men trying to fill the role of being that masculine presence, but it also prohibits them from really being vulnerable about their weaknesses. And it also makes it harder for men to open up because they feel that they will be perceived as less than or less manly or less tough if they actually talk about their feelings. And this also goes into faith based communities as well. And it's really unfortunate because a lot of church communities are led by men. And a lot of church leaders, especially, don't really get to show a side of vulnerability because they want to maintain that strong status of leadership rather than creating spaces for sharing struggles. Men are not often given the opportunity to do that in a spiritual setting because either they are leaders in the church or they need to show that they have that type of masculine presence for their families and just to show different models of manhood in the church. So there are a wide variety of elements to this particular topic. And I feel like as a mental health advocate myself and as a woman, it would be very introspective for me to hear the experiences of different men who not only come from different backgrounds, but also have different stories to tell. And I am excited for not only hearing the experiences, but also coming up with more ways that men can feel more comfortable in seeking help for their mental health, especially in faith based communities and communities of color, because those communities have the most stigmatization when it comes to psychological issues. I am very excited to share this season with you all and to open up more conversations about how men can be more open to seeking help for their mental health and also speaking out about the issues that they face on a psychological level. And I cannot wait for you all to hear the myriad of amazing guests that I have for this season. And I'm also excited not only to hear the experiences of these men, but to also find more ways that men could be open about their mental health. And in closing, I want to share a quote that really encapsulates the mission of this season. It says, "The real man smiles in trouble, gathers strength from distress, and grows brave by reflection." And this was a quote by Thomas Paine. And I agree, especially with the last part about growing brave by reflection. I want this season to be one of transformation, especially for the outlook that society has on men who are more in touch with their emotional intelligence and who want to embrace self care, but are so burdened down by the societal norms of what quote unquote true masculinity is supposed to look like. I want this season to not only be an informative stance on men's mental health, but also to encourage men to really speak out about their mental health issues and also encourage other men to do the same. So I am very, very, very excited about this season, and I hope you all have a very empowering outlook after this season. And I hope that you stay tuned for more empowering episodes on Rough Edges. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Rough Edges podcast with Sarah I. Fox. If you want more updates on the podcast, you can follow on Instagram at rough.edges.podcast, or you can visit the official podcast website at roughedgespodcast.com. Thanks again for listening and have a wonderful day.